She stood in his bedroom with a candelabra in her hand, breathing hard. And for the first time in 2 years, Adrian Wolfe actually looked at her. Not through her, not past her, at her. This wasn't how dignified women behaved. This wasn't strategy or decorum or any of the careful rules she'd been taught since childhood. This was fury in its purest form, unplanned, unsanctioned, and possibly the worst decision of her life. But she didn't lower the candelabra, and he didn't look away. Stay with me until the end. Like this story, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. Eliza Harrow knew exactly how invisible she was. She'd known it for 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days. Not that she was counting, not that she lay awake some nights mentally cataloging every moment she'd stood in the same room as Adrian Wolfe, Duke of Ashmont, while he looked everywhere except at her. That would be pathetic. And Eliza Harrow was many things, but pathetic wasn't supposed to be one of them. The ballroom glittered like something out of a fever dream, all gold leaf and crystal chandeliers, the kind of aggressive wealth that made you slightly nauseous if you thought about it too long. The Ashmont Estate's New Year's Eve ball was the social event of the season, which meant everyone who mattered was here, draped in silk and secrets, laughing at jokes that weren't funny and pretending to enjoy themselves. Eliza stood near a marble pillar, champagne flute in hand, watching Adrian Wolfe not notice her for what felt like the 1,000th time. He moved through the crowd like he owned it, which technically he did. Owned the estate, at least. Probably half the people in this room, too, in one way or another. Dark hair slightly too long to be properly fashionable, jaw sharp enough to cut glass, eyes the color of a winter storm. He wore power like most men wore cologne, liberally and without apology. "You're doing it again," her friend Caroline whispered, appearing at her elbow with the stealth of a particularly judgmental ghost. "Doing what?" "The staring thing, the pining thing, the 'please notice me, Your Grace, I've reorganized my entire personality around you' thing." Eliza's fingers tightened on her champagne flute. "I'm not pining. You're practically vibrating. That's just rage. Rage pining. They look remarkably similar on you." Caroline took a delicate sip of her own champagne, surveying the room with the detached interest of someone who'd long since stopped caring about these performances. "Though I will say, rage is more becoming. You should lean into it more." Across the ballroom, Adrian laughed at something Lady Pemberton said. The sound shouldn't have carried over the music and conversation, but somehow Eliza heard it anyway. Or maybe she just imagined she did. She'd become an expert at filling in the gaps of moments that didn't include her. "He's going to announce his engagement tonight," Caroline said quietly. Eliza's stomach dropped. "What?" "To Vivian Ashford. Everyone knows. Well, everyone except you, apparently, because you've been too busy pretending you're not watching him to actually pay attention to anything useful." Vivian Ashford. Of course, blonde, beautiful, perfectly bred Vivian, whose family tree probably didn't have a single questionable branch, whose conversation never veered into uncomfortable territory, who knew exactly how to laugh at a duke's jokes without being too enthusiastic or too restrained. "I should go," Eliza said. "You should stay. Finish your champagne. Make polite conversation with boring men. Prove you're not devastated." "I'm not devastated?" "Then stay." But Eliza was already moving, weaving through the crowd with the single-minded focus of someone trying very hard not to run. She didn't know where she was going, just away. Away from Adrian's laugh, away from Vivian's perfect smile, away from her own stupid, stubborn heart that refused to accept what her brain had known for months. She was never going to be what Adrian Wolfe wanted. She found herself in one of the estate's many parlors, smaller than the ballroom but no less ornate. Empty, thankfully. She set her champagne down on a side table with more force than necessary, watching the liquid slosh dangerously close to the rim. "Careful, that's imported crystal." Eliza spun around. A man lounged in one of the high-backed chairs near the fireplace, so still she'd missed him entirely in her rush to escape. Not Adrian. This man was older, softer around the edges, with the kind of face that suggested he'd once been handsome and was now simply dissolving slowly into middle age. "Lord Huntley," she said, trying to summon the appropriate smile. Failing. "Miss Harrow." He stood, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd had exactly 3 drinks too many. "Running from the festivities?" "Just needed air." "Funny place to look for it. No windows in here." He moved closer, and something in Eliza's chest tightened. Not attraction, Something more like warning. I should return to the ball. Should you? His smile didn't reach his eyes. You looked rather upset when you left. Trouble with the Duke, perhaps? Heat flooded her face. I don't know what you mean. Of course you don't. Just like you haven't spent 2 years making a fool of yourself over a man who doesn't know you exist. The words hit like a slap. Not because they were cruel. Eliza had heard worse from her own internal monologue, but because they were true. And hearing the truth spoken aloud by someone else made it real in a way she couldn't ignore. Excuse me, she said, moving toward the door. His hand caught her wrist. I could help you, you know. Make him jealous. Men like Wolf, they only want what they think they can't have. Let go of me. Just a suggestion. But he didn't release her. His grip wasn't painful, but it was firm, insistent. You're wasting yourself on him. A woman like you needs someone who can actually see her. I said let go. Or what? You'll scream? Make a scene at the Duke's ball? Ruin what's left of your reputation? The thing about being invisible for 2 years was that you stopped worrying about people seeing you. You stopped calculating risks based on observation and judgment. Because when no one was watching anyway, what did it matter? Eliza drove her heel into his instep with every ounce of force she could muster. Huntley yelped, releasing her wrist. She didn't wait for him to recover, just turned and walked out, heart hammering, hands shaking slightly from adrenaline and something that felt dangerously close to satisfaction. She should go home, should call for her carriage, make polite excuses, disappear into the night like the ghost she'd been pretending to be. Instead, she found herself climbing the main staircase, moving deeper into the private quarters of the estate, where guests definitely weren't supposed to wander. She told herself she was just looking for somewhere quiet, somewhere to collect herself before facing the return journey home, before pretending to her mother that nothing was wrong, before starting the new year with the same old lies. But when she heard Adrian's voice coming from behind a half-open door, she stopped walking. Simply practical, Mother. You've been saying for years I need to marry. Practical. The Dowager Duchess's voice dripped with disdain. You make it sound like a business arrangement. Isn't it? Not for her. Vivian loves you. A pause, then, she loves the title. There's a difference. And you? Do you love her? Another pause, longer this time. I respect her. I enjoy her company. That's more than most marriages start with. It's less than you deserve. What I deserve, Adrian said, voice suddenly hard, is irrelevant. What I need is an heir and a duchess who won't cause problems. Vivian fits both requirements perfectly. Eliza should leave, should stop eavesdropping on a private conversation that had nothing to do with her, should stop torturing herself with confirmation of what she already knew. Adrian Wolfe had never thought of her as anything more than a vague acquaintance, if he thought of her at all. She made it 3 steps before Caroline's voice echoed in her head. You should lean into the rage more. And maybe it was the champagne, or the adrenaline still flooding her system from Huntley's grab, or the sharp, specific humiliation of hearing Adrian discuss his engagement like a livestock purchase. Maybe it was 2 years of careful composure finally cracking under its own weight. Eliza turned around and headed for Adrian's private chambers. She knew where they were. Everyone did. The east wing, 3rd floor, the master suite that overlooked the gardens. She'd never been inside, obviously. Ladies didn't visit gentlemen's bedrooms, especially not unmarried ladies, especially not in estates full of witnesses. But being invisible had its advantages. No one stopped her as she climbed the servants' stairs. No one questioned her as she moved down the dim hallway. No one saw her at all. The door to Adrian's chambers was unlocked. She pushed it open. The room was empty. He was still downstairs, probably accepting congratulations on his impending engagement. The space was surprisingly austere for a duke's bedroom. Dark wood furniture, navy curtains, books stacked on every available surface. It smelled like leather and something else, something sharp and clean that was distinctly Adrian. Eliza stood in the center of the room, breathing hard, trying to figure out what exactly she was doing here. Proving she existed? Making a point no one would hear? Having a private breakdown in someone else's bedroom like a character from a bad novel? She laughed, and the sound came out slightly unhinged. Then she heard footsteps in the hallway. Her heart seized. She had exactly 2 seconds to make a decision. Hide or face whoever was coming with some hastily constructed excuse about getting lost on the way to the ladies' retiring room. The door opened. Adrian Wolfe stepped inside, already loosening his cravat, eyes on the floor, and then he looked up. For a moment, neither of them moved. Eliza watched recognition flicker across his face, followed by confusion, followed by something that might have been annoyance or might have been interest. It was impossible to tell. "Miss Harrow," he said finally, voice carefully neutral. "This is unexpected." Her brain screamed at her to apologize, to explain, to do literally anything except stand there like a criminal caught mid-crime. But her mouth had apparently decided to go rogue. "Is it?" she heard herself say. "I thought I was invisible. Hard to be unexpected when no one notices you exist." His eyebrows rose fractionally. "I'm sorry?" "You should be." This was bad. This was very, very bad. She could see herself from outside her own body. Eliza Harrow, respectable gentleman's daughter, standing uninvited in a duke's bedroom, saying things that couldn't be unsaid. But she couldn't seem to stop. 2 years, she said, voice shaking now. 2 years I've been... She cut herself off. Even in the grip of whatever madness had possessed her, some instinct for self-preservation remained. 2 years you've been what? Adrian closed the door behind him, not leaving, trapping them both in this moment. Breaking into my bedroom? I didn't break in. The door was unlocked. That's not actually better. I don't care. Clearly. He moved closer, and Eliza fought the urge to step back. You want to explain what you're doing here, or should I summon a footman to escort you out? The threat should have frightened her, should have snapped her back to reality, back to the careful rules she'd spent her entire life following. Instead, it made her furious. Go ahead, she said. Summon whoever you want. Tell everyone you found me in your bedroom. I'm sure that won't complicate your perfect engagement to perfect Vivian. Something shifted in his expression. You heard that conversation. Half the house probably heard it. You weren't exactly whispering. So this is what? Revenge? Sabotage? This is me finally admitting I've wasted 2 years of my life on someone who doesn't even see me. The words came out raw, stripped of any pretense. This is me being tired of being invisible. You're not invisible. Don't. She held up one hand. Don't patronize me. You don't remember a single conversation we've ever had. You probably can't name my favorite color or where I grew up or anything about me except that I'm Harrow's daughter, and I exist somewhere on the periphery of your awareness. You're wrong. Am I? What's my favorite color? Green, he said immediately. Dark green, like the forest in early morning. You wore a dress that color to the Blackwood Ball last spring, and when Lady Ashford complimented it, you said it reminded you of the woods near your childhood home in Lincolnshire. Eliza's breath caught. You grew up on a minor estate, oldest of 3 daughters, which means you've spent your life being groomed for marriage and politely told your opinions don't matter. You hate dancing, but you're good at it because your mother made you practice until your feet bled. You read more than you probably should, and you have opinions about things women aren't supposed to have opinions about, which is why you've learned to smile and stay quiet even when someone says something catastrophically stupid. He took another step closer. You're not invisible, Miss Harrow. You're impossible to ignore, which is exactly why I've spent 2 years trying. The silence that followed felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Eliza's hands had started shaking again. She didn't know if she wanted to hit him or kiss him or simply dissolve into the floor. Why? She managed finally. Because men like me don't get to marry women like you. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Is it? I'm a duke, Miss Harrow. I need a wife who understands what that means. Someone who can smile through tedious dinners and manage a household and produce heirs without expecting anything messy like actual affection. Someone who won't care that I'm constantly traveling or distracted or failing to live up to whatever romantic ideal. You think I want romance? The laugh that escaped her was sharp enough to cut. You think I've spent 2 years hoping you'd sweep me off my feet and declare undying love? Haven't you? I wanted you to see me, to talk to me like I have a functioning brain, to stop treating me like decorative furniture. She paused, though I suppose the romance would have been nice too. Despite everything, his mouth twitched, almost a smile. This is insane, Eliza said. I shouldn't be here. You're getting engaged. I'm supposed to be downstairs pretending I'm not devastated, and instead I'm... She gestured vaguely at the room, at him, at the entire absurd situation. Confronting me in my bedroom. Apparently, with no plan. I've never been good at plans. That, Adrian said quietly, is a lie. You're excellent at plans. Too excellent. You've spent 2 years executing a careful campaign to catch my attention while making it look like you weren't trying at all. Heat flooded her face. That's not... The Blackwood Ball wasn't an accident. Neither was the poetry reading at Lady Summersby's, or the charity auction where you bid on the same painting I did, and then graciously withdrew. You've been everywhere I've been. Close enough to be noticed, but not so close it looked deliberate. You noticed all that and still ignored me? I noticed because I was looking. His voice had gone rough. I've been looking since the first time I saw you, standing in the corner at some insufferable dinner party, making clever commentary under your breath to that friend of yours. Caroline, is it? You were wearing blue. You looked bored and brilliant and completely unimpressed by everyone in the room, and I thought, that woman is dangerous. Well, oh, Mom. Eliza couldn't breathe. So, yes, I ignored you. I pretended you were invisible, because the alternative was admitting that I wanted something I couldn't have. Why can't you have it? The question came out quieter than she intended. Why can't you have me? Because I'm not what you think I am. He ran one hand through his hair, destroying its careful arrangement. You see a duke, power, prestige, all that nonsense. But I'm just a man who inherited a title I didn't want and responsibilities I can't escape. I'm not kind, Miss Harrow. I'm not particularly good. I'm selfish and distant, and I'd probably make you miserable within a month. Shouldn't I get to decide that? You don't know what you're deciding. Then tell me. Explain it. Stop making choices for me like I'm a child who can't handle the truth. They were standing too close now. Close enough that she could see the exact color of his eyes, not just gray, but gray with flecks of blue, like storm clouds breaking. The truth, Adrian said slowly, is that I've been engaged twice before. Both times, I called it off. The first woman cried for 3 days straight, then married my cousin out of spite. The second one told me I was incapable of human connection, and she was probably right. Why did you call them off? Because I didn't love them. Because the idea of spending my life with someone I barely tolerated made me want to walk into the ocean. Because I'm apparently cursed with just enough romantic sensibility to make me bad at practical arrangements, and just enough cynicism to make me bad at romance. And Vivienne? Vivienne is safe. She doesn't expect things I can't give. She won't be hurt when I fail to be what she needs. Because she doesn't actually want you, Eliza said. She wants the title. You said so yourself. Yes. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. It's practical. It's cowardice. The word hung between them like a thrown gauntlet. Adrian's expression went very still. Careful, Miss Harrow. Or what? You'll ask me to leave? I think we've established I don't follow instructions very well. She took a breath. You're a coward. You'd rather marry someone you don't care about than risk being hurt by someone you do. You'd rather spend your life in a comfortable prison than fight for something real. And what would you know about it? I know I spent 2 years being careful, being the perfect lady, smiling and staying quiet and hoping you'd notice me if I just tried hard enough to be what you wanted. And it was exhausting and demeaning, and it didn't work. So tonight, I decided to stop. Stop what? Being careful, being perfect, being invisible. She met his eyes. I'm done, Your Grace. I'm done performing for you or anyone else. I'm done shrinking myself down to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. What are you going to do instead? I have absolutely no idea. For the first time since she'd known him, Adrian Wolfe laughed. Really laughed. Not the polite social noise he made at parties, but something genuine and surprised and almost helpless. You're chaos, he said. Is that a compliment? I'm not sure. They stood there, neither moving, the air between them electric with possibility and danger. You should go, Adrian said finally, before someone notices you're missing. I know. Before I do something we'll both regret. Like what? Like this. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle or romantic or any of the things Eliza had imagined in 2 years of private fantasies. It was desperate and furious and tasted like champagne and terrible decisions. His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs pressing against her jaw, and she grabbed the front of his shirt to keep from falling or flying or simply dissolving into light. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Eliza's carefully constructed composure had shattered completely. That was a mistake, Adrian said, though he hadn't let go of her. Definitely. You should leave. Now, before this gets worse. Before you ruin me, you mean? Before I ruin everything." His voice had gone raw. "This isn't a game, Miss Harrow. If anyone finds you here, your reputation, I know the rules. I've known them my entire life. And I'm tired of rules that only apply to me. That's not how the world works. Then maybe the world should change." A knock at the door made them both freeze. "Adrian," the Dowager Duchess's voice, muffled by wood but unmistakable. "Are you in there? The guests are asking for you." Eliza's heart stopped. Adrian's eyes met hers, and in that moment she saw a dozen different futures playing out simultaneously. He could tell his mother to wait, help Eliza escape through the servants' passage, pretend this never happened. Or he could open the door, face the consequences, watch her reputation crumble in real time. "One moment, Mother," he called. Then, to Eliza, barely a whisper, "The balcony. There's a trellis. Can you climb?" "In this dress? Can you?" She thought of everything she'd risked to get here, everything she'd already lost. "Yes." He kissed her again, quick and hard, then pulled away and moved toward the door, giving her time to cross to the balcony, to slip through the glass doors into the cold night air. The trellis was older than it looked, wood rough under her hands, Rose's thorns catching on her skirt. But Eliza climbed anyway, breath misting in the freezing air, heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She made it to the ground just as she heard the bedroom door open, voices floating down from above. "Looking for you everywhere. Vivian's father wants to make the announcement." Eliza didn't wait to hear the rest. She gathered her ruined skirt and ran through the gardens, past the fountain, around to the front of the estate where carriages were still arriving and departing in a steady stream. No one stopped her. No one saw. She was invisible again, sliding back into the life she'd tried to escape. But when she climbed into her family's carriage and told the driver to take her home, her lips were still burning from Adrian's kiss, and her hands were scraped from climbing, and she couldn't seem to catch her breath. Behind her, through the ballroom windows, she could see the party continuing. Adrian back in his place, Vivian at his side. The announcement would come at midnight. The new year would begin with his engagement, and Eliza would wake up tomorrow to the same old life with the same old rules. Except now she knew what it felt like to break them, and she wasn't sure she could go back. The carriage lurched forward, pulling away from the estate, from Adrian, from everything that had just happened. Eliza pressed one hand against the window, watching the lights recede. "Happy New Year," she whispered to no one. Then she closed her eyes and tried to figure out what the hell she was going to do next. The announcement came at midnight, just as Eliza had known it would. She heard about it the next morning from her mother, who'd gotten it from Lady Pemberton's lady's maid, who'd heard it from the housekeeper at Ashmont Estate. The Duke of Ashmont was engaged to Miss Vivian Ashford. They'd toasted with vintage champagne. Vivian had cried delicate, photogenic tears. The Dowager Duchess had smiled for the first time in months. Eliza sat at the breakfast table, pushing eggs around her plate, and felt nothing. That was the strangest part. She'd expected devastation. Rage, maybe. The sharp, clean pain of a door slamming shut on possibility. Instead, she just felt tired. "You're not eating," her mother observed, the way she observed everything, with surgical precision and mild disappointment. "Not hungry." "You left the ball early last night. People noticed." "I had a headache." Convenient timing. Her mother set down her teacup with the kind of deliberate care that meant a lecture was coming. "The Duke's engagement was the social event of the season, and you missed it. I'm sure it was lovely." "Lovely, yes, that's certainly one word for it." A pause. "Lord Huntley was asking about you." Eliza's fork clattered against her plate. "What?" "This morning. He sent a note inquiring about your health. Very considerate of him, given you left so abruptly." The memory of Huntley's hand on her wrist, his smile that didn't reach his eyes, made Eliza's stomach turn. How thoughtful. "He's expressed interest in calling on you, properly this time, with intentions." "No." Her mother's eyebrows rose. "No?" "I'm not interested in Lord Huntley's intentions. Eliza, you're 23 years old. You've had 2 seasons with no serious prospects. Lord Huntley is a viscount with an estate in Surrey and no entanglements. He's not a duke, obviously, but given your circumstances, what circumstances? Don't be obtuse. You're attractive enough, but you have no fortune to speak of, and your father's title is barely respectable. You need to be practical." There was that word again, practical, like it was a virtue instead of a surrender. "I'd rather die alone," Eliza said calmly. "That can be arranged if you keep rejecting every reasonable offer that comes your way." "Huntley isn't reasonable. She stopped herself. Telling her mother about last night would only make things worse, would only confirm that Eliza couldn't be trusted at social events, that she needed stricter supervision, that her judgment was fundamentally flawed. "He's what?" "Nothing. I'm just not interested." Her mother studied her for a long moment, and Eliza had the uncomfortable sensation of being catalogued and found wanting. "You've been strange since last night. Did something happen at the ball?" "No, because if someone said something or if you had some kind of disagreement, nothing happened. I had a headache, I came home, I went to bed. That's all." The lie came out smooth as silk, and Eliza wondered when exactly she'd gotten so good at lying. Her mother didn't look convinced, but she let it drop. "Lord Huntley will call on Thursday. You'll receive him politely, and you'll give him a fair chance. Understood?" "Understood." Eliza escaped to her room as soon as breakfast ended, claiming the headache was returning. It wasn't entirely false. Her temples were throbbing, and her hands still bore faint scratches from the trellis climb, marks she'd hidden under gloves at breakfast. She should feel guilty, should regret everything about last night, the confrontation, the kiss, the absolute recklessness of it all. But when she closed her eyes, all she could think about was the way Adrian had looked at her, really looked, like she was something that mattered, like she was dangerous and fascinating and worth the risk. Then the way he'd let her climb down a trellis in a ball gown while he went back to his perfect, practical engagement. A knock at her door made her flinch. "It's me," Caroline's voice called. "Open up before your mother thinks we're plotting revolution." Eliza unlocked the door. Caroline swept in wearing a traveling cloak still damp from the morning drizzle, her expression somewhere between concern and barely suppressed glee. "Tell me everything," she said, throwing herself into the chair by Eliza's writing desk. "And don't even think about saying nothing happened, because I saw you leave the ball looking like you'd seen a ghost. And then this morning, the entire city is talking about how the Duke announced his engagement exactly 3 minutes after you disappeared. Coincidence? You're a terrible liar. Your left eye twitches." Eliza pressed one hand against her traitorous eye. "It does not." It absolutely does. Now talk." So she did. Not everything. She left out the kiss, left out the desperate, hungry way Adrian had looked at her, left out the part where she'd wanted to stay in his bedroom and damn the consequences. But she told Caroline about the confrontation, about finally saying all the things she'd swallowed for 2 years, about climbing down a trellis while Adrian went back to his engagement party. When she finished, Caroline was staring at her with something approaching awe. "You climbed down a trellis. That's what you're focusing on? You climbed down a trellis in a ball gown while the Duke of Ashmont's mother was in his bedroom." Caroline started laughing, helpless and delighted. "Oh, this is magnificent. This is exactly the kind of chaos I've been begging you to embrace." "It's not chaos. It's humiliation. It's brilliant. You finally told him the truth, and now he has to live with the knowledge that he's a coward who chose safety over something real. He chose practicality over fantasy. That's not cowardice. That's just sense. Since when do you defend him? Since he'd kissed her like she was air and he was drowning. Since he'd looked at her with those storm cloud eyes and admitted he'd been watching her for 2 years. Since he'd made her feel seen for the first time in her life and then sent her down a trellis anyway. I'm not defending him. I'm being realistic. You're being defeatist." Caroline leaned forward. "Listen to me. You did something brave last night. You stopped hiding, and you stopped waiting, and you stopped letting men make all the decisions about your life. Don't backslide now. What else am I supposed to do? He's engaged. It's done. So what? Engagements can be broken. He's broken 2 already. He's not going to break a 3rd. Then make him want to." Eliza laughed, sharp and bitter. "How exactly am I supposed to do that? By being exactly who you were last night. Fearless, honest, refusing to disappear just because it's easier." Caroline paused. "What did he say about you when you confronted him?" Eliza hesitated. "He said I wasn't invisible, that I was impossible to ignore. And he said that's why he'd been trying to ignore me, because wanting me was inconvenient." "Inconvenient?" Caroline's expression went dangerous. "I'm going to murder him." "Get in line." They sat in silence for a moment, rain pattering against the windows, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down between them. "Lord Huntley is calling on Thursday," Eliza said finally. "My mother's insisting I receive him." "The one who cornered you last night?" "She doesn't know about that part." "Tell her." "And say what? That I was in an empty parlor alone with a man who made unwanted advances? She'll say it was my fault for being there in the first place, for not having a chaperone, for existing as a woman in a room." Caroline's jaw tightened. "I hate that you're right." "So do I." "You could refuse to see him." "I could. But then my mother will want to know why, and the truth will come out anyway, and I'll spend the next 6 months locked in this house while she lectures me about propriety and ruined reputations. Your mother is a nightmare. She's practical." There's that word again. Caroline stood, pacing the small room like a caged animal. "I'm so tired of that word, practical, reasonable, appropriate. Like we're supposed to just accept whatever scraps men decide to give us and be grateful for it. What's the alternative? I don't know, but it has to be better than this." Eliza wanted to agree, wanted to believe there was some other option, some third path between submission and ruin. But sitting in her bedroom with scratches on her hands and the memory of Adrian's kiss still burning on her lips, she couldn't see it. The next 3 days passed in a fog of social obligations and carefully maintained lies. Eliza attended a luncheon at Lady Pemberton's, where everyone discussed Vivian's engagement ring in excruciating detail. She went to a musicale at the Ashfords' townhouse, where Vivian played piano with technically perfect but emotionally vacant precision. She smiled and nodded and said all the right things while feeling like she was watching her own life from a great distance. Thursday arrived too quickly. Lord Huntley appeared at precisely 3 o'clock, dressed like he was attending a funeral or a wedding. Eliza couldn't quite tell the difference anymore. Her mother ushered him into the drawing room with the kind of aggressive enthusiasm usually reserved for royalty, then positioned herself in the corner with needlework as the world's least subtle chaperone. "Miss Harrow," Huntley bowed. "You look well." "Thank you." "I trust you've recovered from your headache the other night." "Completely." "Excellent. I was concerned when you left so abruptly." He settled into the chair across from her, too close, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I hope our conversation didn't contribute to your distress." The audacity of it took her breath away. He was sitting there, in her drawing room, pretending their encounter had been a polite conversation instead of an attempted assault, banking on the fact that she couldn't contradict him without destroying her own reputation. "Not at all," she said, matching his false courtesy with her own, "though I did find it somewhat forgettable." His smile tightened fractionally. "I see." "Do you?" "Eliza," her mother warned from the corner. Huntley leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I wanted to apologize if I came on too strong the other night. Sometimes in the heat of the moment, one can be overly enthusiastic. Is that what we're calling it? I simply meant to express my admiration for you, my interest in pursuing a courtship, with your permission and your parents' blessing, of course." "How romantic." "I'm a practical man, Miss Harrow. I believe in being direct about my intentions." "Then let me be equally direct." Eliza set down her teacup with deliberate care. "I'm not interested in your courtship, or your intentions, or anything else you might want to offer." His expression went very still. "I see. May I ask why?" "You may ask. I'm under no obligation to answer." "Eliza!" Her mother stood, needlework forgotten. "Lord Huntley has done us the honor of calling. The least you can do is—" "The least I can do," Eliza interrupted, "is tell the truth. I don't want his courtship. I don't want his company, and unless he has a very short memory, he knows exactly why." Huntley's face had gone red. "Miss Harrow, I think you're confused about what happened the other night." "I'm not confused about anything." "Eliza, what is this about?" Her mother's voice had gone sharp with panic. "What happened at the ball?" This was it, the moment where she could tell the truth and watch everything crumble, where she could accuse Huntley and be accused in turn of impropriety, of leading him on, of being alone with him in the first place. Or she could lie, could smooth it over, send him away with some vague excuse, preserve her reputation at the cost of her self-respect. She opened her mouth, not entirely sure which option would come out. The drawing room door flew open. Adrian Wolfe stood in the doorway, still wearing a riding coat, hair windswept, breathing like he'd run the entire way. Everyone froze. "Your Grace," Eliza's mother stammered, dropping into a curtsy so deep she nearly toppled over. We weren't expecting—" Adrian ignored her. His eyes locked on Eliza, and the look in them made her forget how to breathe. "I need to speak with Miss Harrow," he said, privately. "I'm afraid that's not possible," her mother said, finding her voice. "She's currently receiving Lord Huntley, and propriety dictates—" "I don't care about propriety." He stepped into the room, and despite being outnumbered, he somehow filled the entire space. "Miss Harrow, please." Huntley stood. "Now see here, Your Grace, this is highly irregular." "You're still here." Adrian's gaze swung to Huntley, and something in his expression made the Viscount take a step back. "Why?" "I'm calling on Miss Harrow, with her mother's permission." "And does Miss Harrow want you here?" "That's hardly—" "It's a simple question. Does she want you here, yes or no?" The silence stretched like taffy. "No," Eliza said quietly. "I don't." Adrian turned back to Huntley. "Then leave." "You can't just— I'm a duke. I can do whatever I want." His voice had gone soft, which somehow made it more threatening. "And what I want is for you to leave this house and never come back. Do we understand each other?" Huntley's face had gone from red to purple. He looked at Eliza's mother, clearly expecting her to intervene, but she was staring at Adrian like he'd descended from the ceiling on a beam of light. "This is outrageous," Huntley sputtered finally. "I'll be lodging a complaint with—" "With who? My mother? The Queen?" Adrian smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "Go ahead. Tell them the Duke of Ashmont threw you out of the Harrow household for harassing a young woman who'd already refused you. I'm sure that will reflect wonderfully on your character." Huntley opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Then he turned and walked out, spine rigid with humiliation. The door slammed behind him. Eliza's mother looked like she was trying to decide whether to swoon or start screaming. "Mrs. Harrow," Adrian said, his voice returning to something approaching normal. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I need to speak with your daughter. It's urgent." This isn't— "You're engaged." "I'm aware." "Then what could you possibly need to discuss with Eliza that requires privacy?" That's between Miss Harrow and myself." Eliza found her voice. "Mother, give us 5 minutes." "Absolutely not. The scandal is already happening." Eliza stood, surprised to find her legs steady. "He's in our drawing room. People have probably already seen his horse outside. 5 minutes of private conversation isn't going to make it worse." Her mother looked between them, calculation warring with propriety. 5 minutes. I'll be right outside." "If I hear anything inappropriate—" "You won't, Impus," Adrian said. Her mother swept out, radiating disapproval, and pulled the door shut behind her. The silence that followed felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane. "You broke off your engagement," Eliza said. It wasn't a question. "This morning." "Why?" "Because I'm a coward who chose safety over something real." He took a step toward her. "Your friend was right. You were right. Everyone was right, except me." "That's not an answer." "Yes, it is." Another step. "I spent 3 days trying to convince myself that marrying Vivian was the right choice, the practical choice. I attended dinners and smiled through congratulations and planned a wedding to a woman I barely know, and the entire time all I could think about was you climbing down a trellis in a ball gown." Despite everything, Eliza laughed. "That's what changed your mind, my terrible escape plan?" "That's what made me realize I'd already made my choice." He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the stubble on his jaw. "You said I was choosing comfortable prison over fighting for something real, and you were right. I've been doing it my entire life, choosing what was expected over what I wanted because wanting things felt too dangerous. And now? Now I'm here, making a mess of your drawing room, probably destroying both our reputations, doing everything wrong in the most public way possible." He paused. "Because I'd rather do everything wrong with you than do everything right with someone else." Eliza's heart was doing complicated things in her chest. "That's possibly the least romantic declaration I've ever heard." "I'm bad at this. Clearly. I don't know how to be what you need. I'll probably disappoint you constantly. I'm difficult and distant, and I have no idea how to maintain a normal human relationship." "Are you trying to talk me out of this?" "I'm trying to be honest." His hands came up, hovering near her face, but not quite touching. I'm trying to give you the choice I didn't give you 3 nights ago. Because if you want me to leave, if you want the safe option, the practical option, the option that doesn't involve public scandal and social ruin, I'll go. I'll fix this. I'll make sure Huntley never bothers you again, and you can find someone who actually deserves you. And if I don't want the safe option, his breath caught, then I'm going to ask your father for permission to court you. Properly. In front of everyone. And when they gossip about the Duke who broke his engagement for a gentleman's daughter with no fortune, I'm going to smile and not care, because at least I'll be doing something real for the first time in my life. Eliza studied his face. The sharp angles, the storm cloud eyes, the expression that was equal parts terror and hope. You're still terrible at romantic declarations, she said. I know. And this is going to be a disaster. Probably. My mother is going to have a fit. Your mother is going to have a fit. Vivian is going to tell everyone you're unstable, and half the ton is going to agree with her. I'm aware of all of that. Good. She reached up and grabbed the front of his shirt, the same way she had 3 nights ago in his bedroom. Because I'm saying yes anyway. The kiss was different this time. Less desperate, more deliberate, like they had time to figure out what they were doing, time to learn each other, time to make mistakes and fix them and make them again. When they broke apart, Adrian was smiling. Actually smiling, not the careful social expression, but something genuine and slightly unhinged. Your mother is going to kill me, he said. Probably. And your father is going to demand I explain myself. Definitely. And we're going to have to face everyone at the Pemberton Ball tomorrow night, while they all stare and whisper and judge. Looking forward to it. Eliza straightened his collar, her hands steady. Though you should probably propose a plan. My mother requires plans. I'm going to court you properly, call on you at appropriate times, bring flowers, ask your father for permission to take you driving in the park, do everything by the book. That sounds boring. It sounds respectable. I don't want respectable. I want real. His expression shifted, something dark and promising flickering in his eyes. Then I'm going to court you improperly. Show up at inappropriate times. Say things that make your mother clutch her pearls. Take you places unescorted and let everyone gossip about it. Better. I'm going to argue with you about politics and literature and all the things women aren't supposed to have opinions about. I'm going to ask what you think and actually listen to the answer. I'm going to treat you like you have a functioning brain instead of just a pretty face. Keep going. And when people say I'm making a mistake, that I'm marrying beneath me, that you're not suitable Duchess material, I'm going to tell them they're wrong. Because you're the only person I've ever met who's brave enough to call me a coward to my face, and that's exactly what I need. Eliza's throat felt tight. You're getting better at this. I'm learning from an expert. The door opened. Eliza's mother stood there, face carefully neutral, and behind her, Eliza's father, looking confused and vaguely alarmed. 5 minutes are up, her mother announced, and I believe His Grace has something he'd like to discuss with you, Mr. Harrow. Adrian stepped back from Eliza, straightening his coat. Yes, I do. Eliza's father looked at her, then at Adrian, then back at her. Should I be concerned? Probably, sir, Eliza said. Definitely, Adrian agreed. But also hopeful, son, Eliza added, if you're amenable to hope. Her father sighed the sigh of a man who'd raised 3 daughters and thought he'd seen everything. Let's hear it then. Your Grace, what exactly are your intentions toward my daughter? Adrian met his eyes. Entirely dishonorable, but with your permission, I'd like to make them honorable. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard, Eliza's mother muttered. I haven't proposed yet, Adrian said. That comes later, after the courting, and the arguments, and the part where we figure out if we can actually stand each other for more than 5 minutes at a time. Romantic, Eliza's father said dryly. Honest, Adrian corrected. They stood there, the 4 of them, while rain continued to fall outside and the clock ticked toward evening, and somewhere across the city, news of the broken engagement was probably already spreading like fire. Well, Eliza's father said finally, this is irregular. Yes, sir, and likely to cause a significant scandal. Almost certainly. And you're aware that my daughter is headstrong and opinionated and absolutely will not tolerate being treated like decorative furniture. That's exactly why I'm here. Eliza's father looked at her. Eliza, is this what you want? She thought about Huntley's presumption, about 2 years of being invisible, about climbing down a trellis in the dark while her heart tried to break through her ribs. "Yes," she said, "it is." "Then I suppose we'd better discuss terms." The terms, as it turned out, were complicated. Eliza's father insisted on a 6-month courtship before any formal engagement could be announced. Adrian's mother, when she finally stopped having what the physician diplomatically called nervous palpitations, demanded they attend no fewer than 12 supervised social events to prove this wasn't temporary insanity. Vivian's father threatened legal action for breach of promise, then withdrew the threat when Adrian's solicitor pointed out that announcing an engagement and actually signing a contract were two different things. The gossip was immediate and merciless. By the next morning, 3 different versions of the story were circulating through London's drawing rooms. In one, Adrian had discovered Vivian in a compromising position with a footman. In another, Eliza had used dark magic to ensnare the Duke. In the third, and somehow most persistent, Eliza was pregnant, and Adrian was doing the honorable thing. "I particularly enjoy the one where you're a secret French spy," Caroline said, reading from the scandal sheet she'd smuggled into Eliza's bedroom. "Apparently you seduced the Duke to steal state secrets. I can barely speak French. That's what makes it so clever. No one would suspect." Eliza threw a pillow at her. They were supposed to attend the Pemberton Ball that evening, their first public appearance since Adrian had broken his engagement. Eliza's mother had spent the entire morning in a state of controlled hysteria, alternating between declaring this the best thing that had ever happened and predicting their total social annihilation. "You'll wear the ivory dress," she'd announced at breakfast, "and you'll smile, and you will not under any circumstances let anyone see you rattled." "I'm not rattled." "You're chewing your thumbnail. You only do that when you're rattled." Eliza had immediately stopped chewing her thumbnail. Now, with 6 hours until the ball, she was pacing her bedroom while Caroline read increasingly absurd rumors and tried not to think about the fact that she'd fundamentally altered the course of her entire life based on 3 conversations and a kiss. "What if this was a mistake?" she said suddenly. Caroline looked up from the scandal sheet. "Which part?" "All of it. What if Adrian wakes up in 3 weeks and realizes he's made a terrible error? What if I'm not actually interesting enough to sustain his attention? What if we run out of things to argue about and discover we have nothing in common? Then you'll deal with it, same way you dealt with climbing down a trellis in a ball gown. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be reassuring, it's meant to be true." Caroline set down the scandal sheet. "You spent 2 years wanting him to see you. He sees you now. That's terrifying, but it's also what you wanted. I wanted the fantasy, the idea of him. This is real? Complicated." A knock at the door interrupted them. Eliza's youngest sister, Margaret, poked her head in, eyes wide with barely contained excitement. "There's a delivery for you," she announced. "From the Duke." Eliza's stomach did something complicated. "What kind of delivery?" "Come see." She followed Margaret downstairs, Caroline trailing behind, to find the entrance hall filled with flowers. Not a tasteful arrangement, dozens of them. Roses and peonies and lilies and things Eliza couldn't even name, in every color imaginable, covering every available surface. Her mother stood in the center of it all, holding a card, looking like she'd been struck by lightning. "He's insane," she said faintly. "This is insane." Eliza took the card. "Figured I should do something properly romantic, since I'm apparently terrible at declarations. These are from the hothouse at Ashmont. My mother is furious about the expense, which means I chose correctly. A." Despite everything, Eliza started laughing. "This is too much," her mother said. "People will talk. People are already talking. But this is—" She gestured helplessly at the floral explosion. "This is a statement." "Yes," Eliza agreed. "I think that's the point." Her mother's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly to catalog. Finally, she settled on something that might have been approval. "Well, at least he's committed." The flowers were only the beginning. Over the next week, Adrian appeared at the house with a regularity that bordered on obsessive. Sometimes he brought gifts, books he thought she'd like, a particularly vicious political pamphlet they could argue about, once a small painting of a forest that reminded him of her favorite dress. Sometimes he just showed up and asked if she wanted to go for a walk. Her mother insisted on chaperoning, which meant they spent a lot of time wandering through parks with her mother trailing 10 paces behind, far enough to give them the illusion of privacy, but close enough to intervene if anything scandalous occurred. "This is absurd," Adrian said on the fourth such walk. "We're both adults. We're both unmarried adults, which means we're basically feral children who can't be trusted alone together. I've run an estate for 6 years. I manage investments worth more than most people see in a lifetime. I've advised the Prime Minister on economic policy. And yet you can't walk in a park with a woman without supervision. Funny how that works." He looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "I'm not sure supervision would help. I'm thinking fairly inappropriate things regardless of who's watching." Heat flooded her face. "You can't just say things like that." "Why not? I thought we were being honest." "Honest doesn't mean unfiltered." "Seems like it should." They walked in silence for a moment, leaves crunching under their feet, her mother's footsteps a steady rhythm behind them. "Are you nervous about tonight?" Adrian asked quietly. "The Pemberton Ball. Their official debut as a couple, if you could call it that. More accurately, their official debut as the scandal everyone wanted to witness firsthand." "Terrified," Eliza admitted. "Good. Me too. That's not comforting. It's honest." She looked at him, really looked. The tension in his jaw, the way his hands were clasped behind his back like he was physically restraining himself. The Duke of Ashmont, untouchable and controlled, admitting to fear. "What are you afraid of?" she asked. He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. "Then, that I'm going to disappoint you. That 3 months from now, you're going to wake up and realize you wanted the idea of me more than the reality. That I'm going to say something callous, or forget something important, or fail to be whatever you need, and you're going to regret this." "Adrian, I'm not good at this," he continued, voice rough. "Relationships, vulnerability, any of it. My father died when I was 12, and I learned that caring about people just means giving them the power to destroy you. My mother remarried within a year to a man who treated the title like a business acquisition, and me like an inconvenient asset. I learned to be self-sufficient, to not need anything from anyone." Eliza's chest felt tight. "And now?" "Now I need you, and that's terrifying." She reached for his hand without thinking, then remembered her mother was watching and dropped it again. "You're doing it again." "What?" "Being honest when you should be reassuring me. Would you prefer I lie?" "I'd prefer you trust that I'm not going to bolt at the first sign of difficulty." "Are you sure about that?" The question hung between them, sharp and real. "No," Eliza said finally. "I'm not sure about anything. This is terrifying and complicated, and everyone thinks we're insane, but I'm choosing it anyway. So maybe trust that I know what I'm choosing." His expression shifted, relief and something darker, more desperate. "Eliza." "Your Grace," a voice called from across the park. "How delightful to see you." Adrian's jaw tightened. Eliza turned to see Lady Pemberton approaching with Vivian at her side, both wearing expressions of pleasant malice. "Miss Harrow," Vivian said, her smile sharp enough to cut. "What a surprise." "Is it?" Eliza asked. "We're in a public park." "Of course. I simply meant, well, one hears such interesting stories these days." "I'm sure one does." Vivian's eyes flickered to Adrian. "Your Grace, I wanted to thank you." Adrian looked genuinely confused. "For what?" "For being so decisive about ending our engagement. It saved us both from a dreadful mistake." "I'm glad you see it that way." "Oh, I do. I've had time to reflect, and I realize now that we would have been terribly unsuited. You need someone who can match your intensity, your unpredictability." Her gaze slid to Eliza. "Someone who doesn't mind scandal." Eliza felt her mother tense behind her. This was it, the moment where she could respond with cutting politeness or descend into public confrontation. "You're absolutely right," she said calmly. "Adrian does need someone who can match his intensity, someone who sees him as more than a title or a strategic alliance, someone who isn't afraid to tell him when he's being an idiot." Adrian made a sound that might have been a laugh. Vivian's smile didn't waver. "How, refreshing. Though I do hope you're prepared for what comes with that title. It's not all romantic gestures and park walks. There are responsibilities, expectations, standards to maintain." "I'm aware. Are you?" "Because managing an estate like Ashmont requires more than just passion. It requires education, Breeding, the kind of refined upbringing that prepares one for what? Eliza interrupted. For smiling through dinners where people say catastrophically stupid things? For pretending to care about seating arrangements and who gets precedence at balls? For sacrificing every interesting thought you've ever had to maintain some arbitrary standard of propriety? The park had gone quiet. Even the birds seemed to be listening. I'm sure that's not what Miss Ashford meant, Lady Pemberton interjected, her voice dripping false sweetness. Isn't it? Eliza looked at Vivian. Because it sounds like she's suggesting I'm not qualified to be a duchess based on my breeding and upbringing, which is interesting considering her father made his fortune in coal mining before buying his way into society. Vivian's face went white. Adrian was definitely laughing now, trying and failing to disguise it as a cough. Miss Harrow, Lady Pemberton said coldly, that's hardly true, but it is true. Just like it's true that half the people who will be at your ball tonight are one generation away from trade or scandal or both. We all pretend we're following some ancient code of conduct, but really we're just making up rules as we go along and using them to exclude anyone we don't like. Eliza, her mother hissed. But Eliza was done. Done with polite pretense, done with swallowing her opinions, done with people like Vivian, who wielded propriety like a weapon. You want to know if I'm prepared to be a duchess? She said. I have no idea. Maybe I'll be terrible at it. Maybe I'll offend half the aristocracy and embarrass Adrian at state dinners. But at least I'll be real. At least he'll know exactly who he's married to, instead of discovering 5 years later that he picked someone who'd rather die than show him an authentic emotion. The silence that followed was absolutely glacial. Vivian drew herself up. I think we're finished here. I agree, Eliza said. Vivian and Lady Pemberton swept away, radiating offended dignity. Eliza's mother looked like she might faint. What have you done? Probably destroyed any chance of social acceptance, Eliza admitted. Sorry. Adrian was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. That was stupid? Reckless? Social suicide? Magnificent. Her mother made a strangled sound. You just declared war on half of London's elite, Adrian continued, in a public park, with witnesses, before our first official appearance together. That takes either incredible courage or complete insanity. Probably both. Definitely both. He looked at her mother. Mrs. Harrow, I apologize for any distress this causes your family. I take full responsibility. You're not the one who just insulted Vivian Ashford's lineage in front of Lady Pemberton. No, but I'm the one who's been encouraging Eliza to stop pretending to be someone she's not. This is exactly who she is. Honest, unafraid, unwilling to accept artificial hierarchies or arbitrary rules. He paused. It's why I want to marry her. Eliza's mother looked between them. You're both insane. Probably, Adrian agreed, but we're committed to it. The ball that evening was exactly as terrible as Eliza had anticipated. They arrived fashionably late, Adrian's suggestion to maximize their entrance, and the entire ballroom seemed to freeze when they walked in together. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. People turned to stare with the kind of fascinated horror usually reserved for carriage accidents. Smile, Adrian murmured, like you're enjoying this. I'm not enjoying this. Neither am I. Smile anyway. So she did. Smiled like her life depended on it while Adrian escorted her through the crowd, his hand steady on her arm, both of them pretending not to notice the whispers following them like smoke. Lady Pemberton greeted them with icy politeness. Your Grace, Miss Harrow. However, brave of you to attend. Wouldn't miss it, Adrian said smoothly. They made it approximately 15 minutes before the first direct confrontation. Lord Ashford, Vivian's father, intercepted them near the refreshment table, his face the color of overcooked beef. Ashmont, he said, voice tight with barely controlled fury. I'd like a word. Of course. In private. Adrian's grip on Eliza's arm tightened fractionally. Anything you need to say can be said in front of Miss Harrow. I don't think you want that. I'm certain I do. Ashford's jaw worked. You made a fool of my daughter, in front of everyone. You announced your engagement and then broke it off 3 days later for... His gaze flickered to Eliza with obvious disdain. For this. Careful, Adrian said, voice gone soft and dangerous. I want compensation. For the humiliation. For the damage to my daughter's reputation. Your daughter's reputation is intact. I made it clear the decision was mine alone. That's not good enough. Then I'm afraid you'll be disappointed, because it's all you're getting. I could make things very difficult for you, politically, financially. Adrian smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. You could try, but I don't think you'll like the results. I have significantly more influence than you, Lord Ashford, and significantly less to lose. Basipki, Miss, is that a threat? It's a fact. Now, if you'll excuse us, Ashford grabbed Adrian's arm. We're not finished. Everything seemed to happen very fast after that. Adrian went very still, looking down at Ashford's hand on his arm like it was a particularly offensive insect. Eliza felt the crowd around them collectively hold its breath. Remove your hand, Adrian said quietly, or I will remove it for you. You arrogant... Adrian's free hand came up, catching Ashford's wrist with enough force to make the older man wince. I said, remove it. They stood frozen like that for a long moment. Two men locked in a silent battle of wills while the entire ballroom watched. Then Ashford stepped back, rubbing his wrist. This isn't over. Yes, Adrian said. It is. Ashford turned and walked away, and the crowd parted for him like water. Eliza realized she'd stopped breathing. That was stupid, Adrian finished. Reckless. Probably going to cause more problems. I was going to say impressive. Same thing. He looked down at her, and some of the tension in his expression eased. Are you all right? I'm fine. Are you? I'm trying very hard not to do something that will get us both thrown out. Like what? Like kissing you in the middle of the ballroom just to watch everyone lose their minds. Heat flooded through her. You can't do that. I know. Doesn't mean I don't want to. They stood there, too close, both breathing harder than the situation warranted, while around them the ball slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Dance with me, Adrian said suddenly. What? Dance with me, properly, in front of everyone. They're already staring. Then let's give them something worth staring at. He led her onto the dance floor before she could protest. The orchestra was playing a waltz. Of course it was a waltz, because nothing about this evening was going to be easy, and Adrian pulled her into the proper position with the kind of confidence that made argument impossible. They moved together, and Eliza was distantly aware that she should be counting steps, or maintaining proper distance, or doing any of the things dancing masters had spent years trying to drill into her. Instead, she just looked at Adrian. Everyone's watching, she said quietly. I know. They're judging, calculating, deciding whether we're a scandal or a romance. Let them. This is going to follow us forever. Every event, every social gathering, we're going to be the story people tell. The Duke who broke his engagement, the girl who stole him. I'm aware. Are you? She searched his face. Because this isn't just gossip, Adrian. This is our lives. This is who we're going to be to everyone who looks at us. He pulled her fractionally closer, not enough to be scandalous, but enough that she could feel the tension in his body. Do you want to stop? Walk away? I'll tell everyone this was my mistake, that I pressured you, that you deserve better. No. Then what do you want? The question felt enormous, weighted with more than just this moment. I want you to be sure, Eliza said. I want to know that 3 months from now, when the novelty wears off and we're just two people trying to figure out how to exist together, you're not going to regret this. I can't promise that. The honesty of it felt like a physical blow. I can't promise I won't make mistakes, Adrian continued. Or that there won't be days when this feels impossible, or that I'll always say the right thing or be what you need. But I can promise that I'm choosing this, choosing you, consciously and deliberately, with full awareness of exactly how complicated it's going to be. The waltz continued around them, other couples spinning past in a blur of silk and candlelight. That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me, Eliza murmured. Is it enough? She thought about the past week, about flowers filling her entrance hall and walks in the park, and Adrian admitting to fear, about confronting Vivian and watching Adrian face down Lord Ashford and standing here in front of everyone who thought they were making a terrible mistake. Yes, she said, it's enough. His expression shifted, relief and something fiercer, more possessive. Good, because I'm done pretending to be casual about this. I'm done maintaining proper distance and acting like you're just another social obligation. I want everyone in this room to know exactly how I feel about you. And how do you feel? Terrified, obsessed, completely out of my depth. That's romantic. It's true. The waltz ended. They stood there, still holding each other, while applause rippled through the ballroom. Adrian stepped back, releasing her slowly, his hand lingering on hers for just a moment longer than necessary. "Your Grace!" a voice cut through the crowd. "A moment, if you please." The Dowager Duchess approached with the kind of purposeful stride that meant someone was about to be lectured. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Mother, we need to speak, privately. I'm in the middle of, Now, Adrian." He looked at Eliza, apology in his eyes. "I'll be right back." "Take your time." She watched him follow his mother through the crowd, tension visible in every line of his body, and tried not to think about what that conversation might entail. "Well," Caroline said, materializing at her elbow with a champagne flute, "that was quite a performance." "Which part?" "All of it. The dancing, the staring, the part where half the room looked like they wanted to applaud, and the other half looked like they wanted to call for your exile." "I think I'm going to be sick." "Understandable. Here, drink this." Caroline pressed the champagne into her hand. "And try to look less like you're attending your own execution. Easy for you to say, you're not the one everyone's gossiping about. True, though I am getting some fascinating secondhand attention as your closest friend. Lord Morrison actually asked me to dance. Lord Morrison, who has never acknowledged my existence before. Congratulations." "I'm choosing to take it as a compliment." Caroline paused. "How are you really?" Eliza took a long drink of champagne. "I have no idea. 3 weeks ago, I was invisible. Now I'm the most talked about person in London, and I'm not sure if that's better or worse. It's different. Very different." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the crowd swirl around them like a living thing. "He loves you, you know," Caroline said quietly. Eliza's breath caught. "He hasn't said that. He doesn't have to. It's obvious in the way he looks at you. The way he went to war with half the aristocracy just to be with you. The way he's currently letting his mother lecture him instead of escaping back to your side. That's not love. That's just, what, commitment? Dedication? Choosing you over everything else he could have had? It's too soon. We barely know each other. You've known him for 2 years. I've observed him for 2 years. That's different." "Is it?" Caroline met her eyes. "You spent 2 years learning how he thinks, what makes him laugh, what he values. That's more than most people get before marriage." Eliza wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. Across the ballroom, she could see Adrian and his mother in what appeared to be an increasingly heated discussion. The Dowager Duchess was gesturing emphatically. Adrian's expression had gone carefully blank, the same expression he wore when he was trying very hard not to lose his temper. Then his mother said something that made him flinch. Eliza moved without thinking, crossing the ballroom with single-minded purpose, Caroline trailing behind her. "Completely unreasonable, the Dowager Duchess was saying as Eliza approached. "You cannot simply throw away everything we've worked for because of some infatuation." "It's not an infatuation," Adrian said tightly. "Then what would you call it? You barely know this girl." "Her name is Eliza. I know what her name is. What I don't know is what you're thinking, destroying your engagement, your reputation, your standing in society for someone so completely unsuitable." "Excuse me," Eliza said. They both turned. Adrian's mother looked at her with the kind of icy disdain usually reserved for insects found in one's tea. "Miss Harrow, this is a private conversation." "Then perhaps you should have it somewhere private instead of in the middle of a ballroom where everyone can hear you." The Dowager Duchess's expression went arctic. "I beg your pardon?" "You're making a scene. If you want to lecture Adrian about his choices, do it somewhere that won't provide entertainment for every gossip in London." "How dare you?" "Mother," Adrian said, voice sharp with warning. "That's enough." "It most certainly is not." "This girl is telling me how to conduct myself in public." "This girl has a name," Eliza interrupted. "And she's standing right here. If you have something to say about me, say it to my face instead of talking around me like I'm not capable of defending myself." The silence that followed was absolute. The Dowager Duchess drew herself up to her full height. "Very well. You're unsuitable. Your family has no standing, no fortune, no connections worth mentioning. You have no experience managing an estate or navigating aristocratic society. You're outspoken and opinionated and completely lacking in the refined deportment expected of a duchess." "You're right," Eliza said calmly. About all of it. That clearly wasn't the response the Dowager Duchess had expected. Then why? Because being suitable didn't make Vivian right for Adrian. Being refined and well-connected and properly trained didn't mean she could make him happy. It just meant she fit the requirements on paper. Marriage isn't about happiness. It's about duty, responsibility, maintaining standards. Your marriage, maybe, but not ours. Adrian made a sound that might have been a strangled laugh. The Dowager Duchess's face had gone red. You presume to lecture me about marriage? You, who has never even been engaged? I presume to have an opinion about my own future. And so does Adrian. We're both adults. We're both making this choice with open eyes, whether you approve or not. Adrian, his mother said, voice shaking, are you going to let her speak to me this way? Adrian looked at Eliza, then at his mother. She's right. About all of it. I'm done making choices based on what other people think I should want instead of what I actually want. I'm done sacrificing my life to maintain appearances. Then you're a fool. Probably, but I'd rather be a fool who's happy than a duke who's miserable. His mother stared at him for a long moment, something complicated moving behind her eyes. Hurt. Anger. Maybe something that looked like fear. I will not support this, she said finally. I will not stand beside you and pretend this isn't a disaster. I will not welcome her into this family. That's your choice, Adrian said quietly, just like this is mine. The Dowager Duchess turned and walked away, spine rigid with fury and wounded pride. The crowd around them erupted into whispers. Adrian stood very still, watching his mother's retreat, and Eliza saw the exact moment the weight of what he'd just done settled onto his shoulders. Adrian, don't, he said, don't apologize. Don't ask if I'm all right. Just, he stopped, jaw working. I need air. He walked toward the balcony doors, moving fast enough that Eliza had to half run to keep up. The night air was cold and sharp, carrying the smell of rain and distant smoke. Adrian stood at the balcony rail, hands gripping the stone, breathing like he'd run a mile. That was my mother, he said to the darkness. I just chose you over my mother. I know. She raised me. She's the only family I have left, and his voice cracked. I just told her I don't care about her approval. Eliza moved to stand beside him, not touching, just close. You can change your mind. Tell her you made a mistake. Apologize. Fix this. Is that what you want? No, but this isn't about what I want. This is your family, your relationship with your mother. I'm not going to be the reason you destroy that. He turned to look at her, and his eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. You're not the reason. She is. She spent my entire life trying to control me, deciding who I should marry, how I should behave, what kind of duke I should be, and I let her. Because it was easier than fighting, easier than admitting that I wanted something different. Adrian, I'm tired of easy, he said fiercely. I'm tired of doing what's expected and ignoring what I actually feel and pretending I don't care about anything because caring makes you vulnerable. You make me want to care. You make me want to fight for something instead of just accepting whatever life hands me. That's terrifying. I know. He reached for her hand, pulling her closer. But I'm done being afraid. Your mother's going to hate me forever. Possibly. Half of London thinks I'm a social climbing opportunist. Probably. This is only going to get harder. Definitely. His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. Are you having second thoughts? Eliza thought about the Dowager Duchess's fury, about Vivian's cutting remarks and Ashford's threats, and the hundreds of people in that ballroom who were probably still gossiping about them. Then she thought about Adrian standing in her drawing room, admitting he needed her, about flowers filling her entrance hall, about him choosing her over safety, over expectation, over everything that should have mattered more. No, she said, no second thoughts. He kissed her then, right there on the balcony where anyone could see, and Eliza stopped caring about gossip or propriety or anything except the taste of champagne and the way his hands trembled slightly against her face. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. We should go back inside, he murmured, before people start making up even worse stories about what we're doing out here. In a minute, They stood like that, wrapped in darkness and each other, while inside the ball continued without them, and London spun its tales, and somewhere across the city, Adrian's mother was probably planning her revenge. Eliza didn't care. For the first time in her life, she was exactly where she wanted to be, with exactly who she wanted to be with, and the rest of the world could think whatever it wanted. "Eliza," Adrian said quietly. "Yes? I'm going to marry you, formally, properly, 6 months from now or 6 years from now or whenever you're ready, but I'm going to marry you." It wasn't a proposal, not quite. More like a statement of intent, a promise. "I know," she said. "Good." Behind them, the balcony doors opened. "There you are." Caroline's voice cut through the darkness. "You need to come back inside, now." Something in her tone made Eliza's stomach drop. "What's wrong?" "It's Lord Huntley. He's telling everyone you two were alone together the night of the New Year's ball, in a compromising position." Adrian's hands dropped from Eliza's face. "What?" "He's making accusations about Eliza's virtue, about your judgment, about whether this entire courtship is just you trying to preserve her reputation after ruining it." Caroline's face was pale. "Adrian, he's destroying her, right now, in front of everyone." Adrian moved before Eliza could stop him, striding back through the balcony doors with the kind of cold fury that made people step out of his path. The ballroom had rearranged itself while they'd been outside. Lord Huntley stood near the center, surrounded by a cluster of older aristocrats who were nodding along to whatever poison he was dispensing. He looked sober now, composed, every inch the concerned gentleman sharing reluctant truths. Simply felt someone needed to speak up. He was saying as they approached, "For the Duke's sake, if nothing else. The girl has been manipulating him from the start." "That's quite enough," Adrian said. The crowd parted. Huntley turned, and something flickered in his expression. Fear, quickly masked by righteous indignation. "Your Grace, I was just explaining to Lord Pemberton and the others about the night of your engagement announcement, how I discovered Miss Harrow in a rather compromising situation." "You're lying. I wish I were. But I saw her with my own eyes, alone in one of the parlors, clearly distressed. When I tried to help, she became agitated, violent even." He held up his hand as if displaying a wound, though Eliza could see no mark from where she stood. "I can only assume she'd had an assignation that had gone poorly." The whispers started immediately, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Eliza felt Caroline's hand on her arm, steadying. "Don't," Caroline whispered. "Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you react." But Adrian was already speaking, voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Let me make sure I understand. You're claiming that Miss Harrow was alone in a parlor, in a distressed state, and your response was to, what, corner her? Attempt to help, despite her clear discomfort?" Huntley's expression tightened. "I was merely concerned. You were drunk and opportunistic, and when she rejected your advances, you grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave marks." The whispers stopped. The silence that replaced them was absolute. "That's a serious accusation," Lord Pemberton said quietly. "It's the truth," Adrian said. "Miss Harrow told me about the encounter the next day, showed me the bruises on her wrist. I wanted to call you out immediately, but she asked me not to, said it would only make things worse for her." Eliza's breath caught. He was lying. She'd never shown him any bruises, had never even mentioned Huntley until days later. But he was lying so smoothly, so convincingly, that even she almost believed it. "Bruises," Huntley repeated, voice strangled. She's making that up. There were no bruises." "Weren't there?" "Because several people at this very ball heard you ask permission to court her. Why would you pursue a woman you'd supposedly discovered in a compromising position unless you thought you could use that information against her? Unless you thought you could force her hand by threatening her reputation?" Huntley's face had gone from red to purple. "That's not... I would never." "You would. You did." Adrian took a step closer. "You tried to manipulate a woman into accepting your courtship by making her believe she had no other choice. And when that didn't work, when she rejected you anyway, you decided to destroy her reputation publicly, to punish her for daring to refuse you. This is slander. This is truth. And if you want to challenge it, we can do this properly. Name your seconds. Choose your weapons. I'll meet you at dawn and we can settle this the traditional way." The entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Dueling was illegal, technically, but it still happened in quiet fields outside the city, with doctors and witnesses sworn to secrecy. A challenge issued this publicly, this deliberately, couldn't be ignored. Huntley looked around the room, clearly searching for support. But the aristocrats who'd been nodding along to his story moments ago had taken careful steps back. No one wanted to be associated with a man being called out by a duke. "You're insane," Huntley said finally. "I'm not going to duel you over some ridiculous, then apologize, publicly. Admit you lied about Miss Harrow. Admit you tried to coerce her. Admit you're spreading malicious gossip because she rejected you. I will do no such thing. Then we duel." Adrian's voice had gone very quiet, very dangerous. "Tomorrow morning, Hyde Park. And when I put a bullet in you, because I will, everyone here will know exactly what kind of man you are." Eliza couldn't breathe. This was spiraling out of control. Adrian was going to get himself killed or arrested or both, and it would be her fault, her mess, her refusal to just let this go. "Stop." The word came out stronger than she'd intended. "Both of you, stop." She stepped forward into the space between them, acutely aware of every eye in the room fixed on her. "Lord Huntley," she said, voice carrying, "you did corner me. You did make unwanted advances, and when I refused you, you grabbed my wrist and suggested I had no other options. That's the truth, whether you admit it or not." "You can't prove any of that," Huntley said, but his voice shook. "Can't I? Because I'm fairly certain if we ask the servants who was where that night, someone would remember seeing you follow me into that parlor. Someone would remember you leaving looking angry. Someone always sees." She watched him calculate, watched him realize that she was right. In a house full of servants, nothing stayed secret forever. "But here's the thing," she continued. "I don't need you to admit it. I don't need your apology or your acknowledgement, because everyone in this room is going to make their own judgment about what happened, and they're going to base it on your character, not mine. My character is impeccable. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, you look like a man who got drunk at a ball, cornered a woman half your size, tried to force your attentions on her, and then tried to destroy her reputation when she rejected you. That's not impeccable. That's pathetic." The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Then someone in the crowd laughed. Not loud, barely more than a chuckle, but in the absolute quiet of the ballroom, it sounded like thunder. Others joined in, scattered at first, then spreading until half the room was laughing at Huntley's expense. His face went from purple to white. You can't." "I think we can," Eliza said calmly. "I think we can stand here and watch you try to salvage this, or you can leave with whatever dignity you have left. Your choice." For a moment, she thought he might actually challenge Adrian, might push this to violence just to save face. Then he turned and walked out, spine rigid, while the laughter followed him like a curse. The crowd erupted into conversation the moment he was gone, everyone talking at once, dissecting what had just happened, already turning it into the story they'd tell tomorrow. Adrian was staring at her with an expression somewhere between awe and terror. That was stupid, reckless? I was going to say extraordinary. Eliza's legs felt suddenly unsteady. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was draining away, leaving nothing but exhaustion and the slow dawning realization of what she'd just done. She'd publicly accused a viscount of assault, had humiliated him in front of half of London's elite, had made herself into a spectacle, again because apparently she was incapable of handling anything quietly. "I need air," she said. This time, when she headed for the balcony, Adrian let her go. Caroline found her 10 minutes later, sitting on the stone balustrade with her slippers kicked off, staring at nothing. "You're going to freeze to death out here," Caroline said, draping her own shawl around Eliza's shoulders. "Don't care." "Yes, you do." Caroline sat beside her. That was incredible, by the way. Terrifying and possibly career-ending, but incredible. He was going to duel Huntley. I know. Over me, over my reputation, like I'm some damsel who can't defend herself. To be fair, you just proved you can defend yourself quite effectively. Eliza laughed, and it came out slightly unhinged. I just destroyed a man's reputation in front of everyone. That's not defending myself. That's warfare. Same thing, sometimes. They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the ball drifting out through the open doors. Music and laughter, and the relentless churn of gossip. "What happens now?" Eliza asked quietly. "I don't know, but I think you just changed the rules." "What rules?" "All of them. The ones that say women have to accept harassment quietly. The ones that say we can't fight back without destroying ourselves. The ones that say men like Huntley can do whatever they want because no one will believe us if we speak up." Caroline paused. "You spoke up, in front of everyone, and they believed you. Some of them believed me. The rest probably think I'm lying for attention. Let them think that. The people who matter believed you. I saw their faces. They knew you were telling the truth." Eliza wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe that one moment of honesty could actually change anything. But she'd spent too many years watching men like Huntley get away with worse to trust in instant justice. The balcony doors opened again. This time it was Adrian's mother. The Dowager Duchess looked smaller somehow, older, the fury from earlier replaced by something harder to name. "Miss Harrow," she said. "Might I have a word?" Caroline stood immediately. "I'll just go make sure no one started any duels without us." She disappeared inside, leaving Eliza alone with the woman who'd called her unsuitable an hour ago. The Dowager Duchess moved to stand at the balustrade, looking out over the garden. That was quite a performance. "If you're here to tell me I embarrassed your son, I'm here to apologize." Eliza's breath caught. "What?" "I was wrong. About you. About what Adrian needs." The Dowager Duchess's voice was careful, controlled. "I watched you in there. Watched you face down a man twice your size and turn an entire room against him with nothing but words and conviction. That takes a particular kind of strength. It takes desperation. No, it takes courage. The kind I'm not sure Vivian Ashford possesses." She paused. "The kind Adrian needs if he's going to survive the life he's inherited." Eliza didn't know what to say to that. Didn't trust this sudden reversal. "I loved my husband," the Dowager Duchess continued, "deeply, stupidly, to the point where losing him nearly destroyed me. When he died, I swore I would never let Adrian make the same mistake, would never let him care about someone enough to be broken by them. That's not protection, that's prison. I know that now." She turned to look at Eliza. "I spent 12 years trying to mold my son into something safe, someone who couldn't be hurt. And all I did was make him miserable. He's not miserable now. No, he's terrified, which is somehow worse and better at the same time." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "You terrify him, Miss Harrow, in the best possible way. I terrify him in every possible way. Good, he needs that. Needs someone who won't let him retreat into cold efficiency and emotional distance. Someone who will make him feel things even when it's uncomfortable." Eliza looked at the woman who'd called her unsuitable, who'd told Adrian she wouldn't support his choice, who'd walked away rather than accept defeat. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I want you to understand what you're taking on. Being a duchess isn't just about managing estates and attending balls. It's about carrying the weight of everyone's expectations while pretending it doesn't crush you. It's about smiling through dinners with people you despise and making decisions that affect hundreds of lives and never, ever letting them see you break. You think I can't handle that. I think you're the only person I've met who might actually survive it." The Dowager Duchess straightened. "But I also think you should set your own terms. Don't let Adrian, don't let anyone define what kind of duchess you have to be. Make your own rules. Break the ones that don't make sense, and if the aristocracy doesn't like it, tell them to adjust." Despite everything, Eliza smiled. "That sounds like permission to cause chaos. That sounds like permission to be yourself, which, from what I've observed, amounts to the same thing." The Dowager Duchess moved toward the doors, then paused. "One more thing. When Adrian proposes, and he will propose properly, with a ring and a speech and all the traditional nonsense, make him work for it. Don't say yes immediately just because it's expected. Make sure he knows exactly what he's asking, what you're both agreeing to. Why? Because marriages that start with complete honesty have a better chance of surviving. And I'd very much like my son's marriage to survive." She disappeared inside, leaving Eliza alone with her thoughts, and the cold night air, and a future that felt suddenly, terrifyingly real. By the time Eliza made her way back inside, The ball had transformed into something different. People were still talking about the confrontation with Huntley, but the tone had shifted. Less scandalized gossip, more grudging respect. Lady Pemberton herself approached Eliza near the refreshment table, her expression unreadable. "Miss Harrow, that was quite something." Eliza braced herself. "I apologize if I caused a scene. Don't. Huntley's been making women uncomfortable for years." Someone needed to say something publicly. She paused. "I'm glad it was you." Before Eliza could respond, Lady Pemberton had moved on, but others were approaching now, women, mostly, with careful smiles and words of support. "You were very brave," one whispered. "I wish I'd had your courage when something similar happened to me," another murmured. They didn't stay long, didn't make a production of it, but each quiet word of solidarity felt like absolution Eliza hadn't known she needed. Adrian found her an hour later, after she'd survived approximately 15 more conversations and danced with 3 different men who wanted to prove they supported the Duke's choice. "We should leave," he said quietly, "before someone decides to make this evening even more memorable." "Good idea." The carriage ride back to her house was quiet. Adrian sat across from her, unusually subdued, looking out the window at the dark streets. "You're angry," Eliza said finally. "I'm trying to decide." "Decide what?" "Whether I'm angry at Huntley for being exactly the kind of person I expected him to be, or angry at myself for not handling it better, or angry at the entire system that made you think you couldn't report what he did without destroying your own reputation. That's a lot of anger. I'm a complicated person." Despite everything, Eliza laughed. "You're an idiot." "Probably." He finally looked at her. "You didn't need me to defend you tonight. You handled Huntley better than I could have. You were ready to shoot him. That would have been satisfying, but ultimately counterproductive. Whereas humiliating him publicly was both satisfying and productive." "Exactly." His expression shifted, something warm and proud moving behind his eyes. "You were magnificent, brutal and strategic and completely unafraid. I've never seen anything like it." Heat flooded her face. "I was terrified." "You hid it well." Years of practice smiling through uncomfortable situations. "Well, it paid off. Half the women at that ball were looking at you like you'd personally liberated them from something. That's dramatic." "That's accurate." He leaned forward. "You changed something tonight, Eliza. Changed the conversation about what women can say, what they can do when men cross lines. That matters. Oh, or I just made a spectacle of myself and everyone will forget about it by next week." "They won't forget, trust me." The carriage pulled to a stop outside her house. Adrian climbed out first, then offered his hand to help her down. On the doorstep, lit by lamplight, they stood too close while a respectable distance away the driver pretended not to watch. "Thank you," Eliza said quietly, "for being willing to duel for me, even though it was stupid and illegal and would have solved nothing." "You're welcome. Thank you for making it unnecessary by being terrifying on your own. I aim to please. You aim to give me heart palpitations." He lifted her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I'll call on you tomorrow, properly, with flowers that won't make your mother faint. She's developed a tolerance. You'll have to work harder. Challenge accepted." He climbed back into the carriage, and Eliza watched it disappear into the night before finally heading inside. Her mother was waiting in the drawing room, still fully dressed, looking like she'd aged 10 years in one evening. "Tell me everything," she demanded. So Eliza did, started with Huntley's accusations and ended with the Dowager Duchess's surprising reversal, leaving out only the parts that would send her mother into genuine hysterics. When she finished, her mother sat in silence for a long moment. "You humiliated a Viscount," she said finally. "Yes." "In front of half of London." "Yes." "And the Duke's mother apologized to you." "Apparently." Her mother pressed one hand to her forehead. "I don't understand this world anymore." "Neither do I." "But you're happy, despite all the chaos and scandal and social destruction?" Eliza thought about Adrian ready to duel for her honor. About the Dowager Duchess, telling her to make her own rules. About the women who'd whispered support in quiet voices, but had whispered nonetheless. "Yes," she said, "I'm happy." Her mother studied her for a long moment. Then she stood, crossed the room, and pulled Eliza into a fierce hug. "Then that's all that matters," she said quietly, "though I reserve the right to panic about the details later." "Fair enough." Eliza made it to her bedroom before the exhaustion truly hit. She collapsed onto her bed, still wearing her ball gown, too tired to change, and stared at the ceiling while her mind replayed the evening in relentless detail. She'd done it, had actually stood up to Huntley in front of everyone, had faced down the gossip and the judgment, and had somehow come out the other side still standing, more than standing, winning. A knock at her door made her groan. "I'm asleep." "No, you're not," Caroline's voice called. "I can hear you thinking from the hallway." Eliza dragged herself upright and opened the door. Caroline swept in carrying what appeared to be an entire bottle of wine. "Emergency celebration," she announced, producing 2 glasses from somewhere in her cloak. "We're getting drunk and dissecting everything that happened tonight. I'm exhausted. You're exhilarated. There's a difference." Caroline poured wine with abandon. "Now, let's start with the moment you decided to verbally eviscerate Huntley in front of God and everyone." They talked until dawn, going over every moment, every reaction, every subtle shift in the crowd's mood. By the time the sun started creeping through the windows, Eliza's throat was raw from talking and laughing and occasionally crying from exhaustion. "You know what this means," Caroline said, refilling their glasses for what had to be the 5th time. "What?" "You can't go back. Can't return to being the invisible girl who stays quiet and hopes no one notices her. You've declared yourself, loudly, in front of everyone. I know. Good. Because that's who you should have been all along." Eliza looked at her best friend, slightly drunk, absolutely exhausted, completely loyal. "Thank you for being here, for all of this. Please, like I'd miss watching you destroy the patriarchy one Viscout at a time." They both dissolved into slightly hysterical laughter. When Caroline finally left, the sun was fully up and Eliza could hear the servants starting their morning routines below. She should sleep, should at least change out of her ball gown. Instead, she went to her writing desk and pulled out a piece of paper. She had no idea what she was going to write. A letter to Adrian, maybe, or just her own thoughts about everything that had happened. But her hand moved across the page with surprising clarity, words flowing out faster than she could examine them. By the time she finished, she had 3 pages of her own manifesto, everything she wanted from a marriage, from a life, from herself. All the rules she wanted to break, and the ones she wanted to keep, and the future she wanted to build. She read it over once, then folded it carefully and tucked it into her desk drawer. When Adrian proposed, and he would propose, she knew that now, with absolute certainty, she'd give it to him. Let him read exactly what he was signing up for before he committed to anything. The Dowager Duchess had been right about one thing. Marriages that started with complete honesty had the best chance of surviving, and Eliza was done with anything less than complete honesty. 3 days later, flowers arrived. Not dozens this time, hundreds. Every type of orchid Adrian could apparently procure, filling the entrance hall until it looked like a tropical greenhouse had exploded. The card read, "These are supposed to represent strength and resilience. Also, they're difficult to kill," which seemed appropriate. Her mother took one look at the display and had to sit down. "This is excessive," she said faintly. "This is Adrian." "You're going to marry a madman." "Probably." But Eliza was smiling when she said it, already planning her response. Something equally excessive and slightly unhinged, because if they were doing this, they were doing it spectacularly. The girl who'd been invisible was gone, and the woman who'd taken her place had no intention of ever disappearing again. The orchids lasted exactly 4 days before Eliza's youngest sister, Margaret, accidentally knocked over the largest arrangement while chasing the cat through the entrance hall. Water and exotic flowers spread across the marble floor in a chaos that somehow felt prophetic. "I'm sorry," Margaret wailed, trying to salvage blooms that were already beyond saving. "It's fine," Eliza said, and meant it. The flowers had been beautiful, but they'd also been overwhelming. A reminder that everything with Adrian existed at the extremes. Nothing quiet, nothing simple, just constant, glorious chaos. She was still cleaning up petals when Adrian arrived unannounced, which was becoming his signature move. "I heard there was an orchid casualty," he said from the doorway. "Your spy network is impressive." "I don't have spies. I have a very chatty groom who's friends with your stable boy." He surveyed the wreckage. "Should I send more?" "Absolutely not. My mother's convinced we're trying to bankrupt you through floral expenses. I'm a duke. I can afford flowers. You're a duke who broke his engagement and caused a massive scandal. Maybe practice some restraint?" He considered this. No. Despite everything, Eliza laughed. You're impossible. I'm consistent. He stepped over the puddles to stand closer. I actually came to ask you something properly, without flowers or grand gestures or anything that might give your mother palpitations. Something in his tone made Eliza's stomach flip. That sounds ominous. It's the opposite of ominous. He pulled an envelope from his coat. I need you to read this, before we go any further, before I do anything else that might be considered a formal step. She took the envelope, feeling its weight. What is it? A contract, of sorts. Everything I'm proposing for our marriage. How we'll manage finances, where we'll live, how decisions will be made, what kind of independence you'll have. My solicitor thinks I'm insane for putting it in writing, but I wanted you to see exactly what I'm offering before you make any commitments. Eliza stared at him. You wrote a marriage contract. More like terms of partnership. I told you I'm bad at romance. This is possibly the least romantic and simultaneously most romantic thing anyone's ever done. Read it first, judge after. She broke the seal and unfolded the pages. Adrian's handwriting covered them, surprisingly neat for someone who acted like chaos incarnate. She read slowly, aware that he was watching her, that this mattered in ways she was only beginning to understand. The terms were extraordinary, not just generous, radical. He was proposing equal say in estate management, a separate income she'd control completely, the right to maintain her own interests and friendships without his permission. There were clauses about respecting her autonomy, about making major decisions together, about what would happen if they fundamentally disagreed on something important. But it was the last paragraph that made her throat tight. I cannot promise to be perfect. I cannot promise not to make mistakes or say the wrong thing, or occasionally retreat into the kind of emotional distance that drove 2 previous fiancés away. But I promise to try, to keep trying, to treat you as an equal partner rather than an ornament or obligation. And if I fail, when I fail, I promise to listen when you tell me I'm being an idiot, because you will. And I'll probably deserve it. She looked up. Adrian was leaning against the wall, trying to appear casual and failing completely. This is insane, she said. His expression closed off slightly. If you think it's too much, it's not enough. What? She moved to her mother's writing desk, pulled out the folded pages she'd written after the Pemberton ball, and handed them to him. Read these first, then tell me if you still want to negotiate. Adrian unfolded them slowly, and she watched his expression change as he read. Surprise, then understanding, then something that looked dangerously close to relief. Her manifesto wasn't as formally structured as his contract, but it covered the same ground. What she wanted, what she needed, what she absolutely wouldn't tolerate. The kind of duchess she intended to be, not the perfect, polished version society expected, but something messier and more real. When he finished, he was smiling. You want to abolish the formal dinner seating chart? It's archaic and promotes artificial hierarchies. I agree completely. My mother will have an aneurysm. Your mother told me to make my own rules. She's going to regret that. He set down her pages carefully. So, my terms or yours? Both combined, with revisions. We're negotiating our marriage like a business merger. Would you prefer I swoon and accept whatever you offer without question? I'd prefer exactly this. He crossed to where she stood. Though I do have one addition to the contract. What? You have to promise to keep challenging me, keep calling me out when I'm being an idiot. Keep refusing to let me retreat into comfortable distance. Keep being exactly who you were at the Pemberton ball, fearless and fierce and completely unwilling to accept less than you deserve. That's not a contract term, that's just who I am. Then it should be easy to agree to. They stood there, surrounded by destroyed orchids and their competing manifestos, negotiating the future like it was something they could actually control. I need to add something too, Eliza said. To your terms. What? You have to promise to keep being honest, even when it's uncomfortable. Even when the truth is that you're scared or uncertain or don't know what you're doing. No retreating behind the Duke persona. No pretending everything's fine when it's not. That's going to be difficult. Good. If this were easy, we'd both get bored. He laughed, and the sound was bright enough to chase away the last remnants of doubt that had been clinging to Eliza since the ball. So we have terms, Adrian said. We have mutual understanding. We have approximately 6 more weeks until my mother's arbitrary courtship deadline expires. The question is, what do we do now? Now? Eliza glanced at the mess of flowers and water still covering the entrance hall. Now I finish cleaning up this disaster, and you leave before my mother discovers you're here unchaperoned again. Practical. Someone has to be. But when he moved toward the door, she caught his hand. Adrian, thank you. For the contract, for taking this seriously, for treating me like a partner instead of a prize. His fingers tightened on hers. Thank you for not settling, for demanding more, for making me work for this instead of just accepting it because it's expected. You're welcome. Now go before Margaret tells Mother you're here and we have to endure another lecture about propriety. Bar Sami. He left, but the warmth of his hand lingered long after the door closed. The next 6 weeks were a study in controlled chaos. Adrian called on Eliza 3 times a week, bringing flowers that were progressively less extravagant, but somehow more thoughtful, a single rare book one week, a political pamphlet they could argue about the next, once a box of chocolate that he admitted he'd simply wanted an excuse to share. They went on carefully chaperoned walks where they debated everything from economic policy to whether cats were objectively superior to dogs. They attended precisely 11 of the 12 social events the Dowager Duchess had mandated, skipping only the opera because Eliza had developed a convenient headache, and Adrian had immediately declared he was also suffering from one. Transparent, Caroline had said when Eliza admitted to the deception. Effective, Eliza had countered, but the walks and the balls and the carefully managed public appearances were just performance. The real relationship happened in stolen moments. Adrian appearing at her house at odd hours with questions about estate management, Eliza sending him letters full of suggestions for improving tenant housing that he actually implemented. They revised their contract 3 times, arguing over details like how often they'd be required to attend court functions. Adrian wanted quarterly, Eliza insisted on only what was absolutely mandatory, and whether she could maintain her own political salon. Adrian thought it was brilliant, Eliza worried about the optics. You're overthinking this, he said during one particularly heated revision session. I'm trying to protect both of us from future disasters. Disasters are inevitable. That's why we're putting escape clauses in the contract. We don't have escape clauses. We have contingency plans. Same thing. Not remotely the same thing. Her mother walked in on one such argument to find them surrounded by papers, both gesturing emphatically, neither backing down. This is what your marriage is going to look like, isn't it? She'd said faintly. Probably, they'd answered in unison. Her mother had just sighed and left them to it. The turning point came 5 weeks into the courtship, at the Ashford Spring Ball. Eliza hadn't wanted to go. Attending an event hosted by Vivian's family felt like walking into hostile territory. But Adrian had insisted it would look strange if they avoided it, and the Dowager Duchess had agreed. You need to prove you're not hiding, she'd said. That you're not ashamed of your relationship. I'm not ashamed, I'm practical. Then be practically brave. So Eliza had worn her best dress, deep emerald that made her eyes look dangerous, and prepared for battle. The Ashford Ball was even more ostentatious than the Pemberton event, all white roses and crystal and aggressive displays of wealth. Vivian stood near the entrance in pale blue, greeting guests with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. When Eliza and Adrian approached, that smile went positively glacial. Your Grace, Miss Harrow, how unexpected. Is it? Adrian said mildly. We were invited. Of course. We invited everyone. Vivian's gaze flickered to Eliza. I trust you're enjoying your courtship, though I suppose enjoying might not be the right word for something so complicated. It's complicated, Eliza agreed, but worth it. How lovely, though I do wonder how long that will last. The novelty of defiance does tend to fade. Adrian's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Eliza smiled. I'm sure you'd know more about that than I would. How is Lord Markham, by the way? Vivian's face went white. I heard you've been seen together quite frequently, Eliza continued pleasantly. At the theater, in the park, very publicly, very quickly after your broken engagement. One might think you'd been cultivating that relationship for some time. The silence that followed was exquisite. Lord Markham was a widower, wealthy, perfectly respectable, and had been courting Vivian's older sister until 3 weeks ago, when he'd abruptly transferred his attentions to Vivian instead. I don't know what you're implying, Vivian started. I'm not implying anything.
I'm observing, the way you observed about me and Adrian. Eliza's smile never wavered. Funny how quickly you found consolation after your terrible heartbreak, almost like you weren't heartbroken at all. Vivian looked like she wanted to say something cutting, but too many people were listening now. Instead, she turned and walked away, spine rigid with fury. Adrian was staring at Eliza with something approaching awe. Did you just imply that Vivian was already involved with Markham before your engagement ended? Possibly. I have no proof, of course. Do you need proof? No, I just needed to make her stop acting like she's the wounded party in this. Eliza straightened her gloves. Shall we dance? They did. And this time, when they moved through the ballroom, people weren't just staring, they were nodding, acknowledging. Some even looked approving. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. Somewhere between the Pemberton ball and now, between humiliating Huntley and standing up to Vivian, Eliza had stopped being the scandal and started being the story. People are accepting us, she murmured during the waltz. People are terrified of us, Adrian corrected. They're not sure if we're brilliant or insane, so they're hedging their bets by being polite. I'll take it. After the dance, the Dowager Duchess appeared with Lord Ashford in tow. Vivian's father looked uncomfortable, his earlier bluster from the Pemberton ball completely absent. Your Grace, he said stiffly, I wanted to apologize for my behavior at the last event. I was overly protective of my daughter. Adrian's expression remained carefully neutral. I understand. And I wanted to congratulate you both. On your courtship, Vivian has found her own happiness with Lord Markham, so all's well that ends well. It was the most transparent face-saving Eliza had ever witnessed, but she smiled graciously anyway. How wonderful for her. Lord Ashford escaped as quickly as dignity allowed. The Dowager Duchess watched him go, then turned to Eliza. Well played. I didn't do anything. You did everything. You made Vivian's quick attachment to Markham into the real story. Made her look opportunistic instead of heartbroken. Turned the narrative completely around. She paused. That was strategic brilliance. That was self-defense. In society, they're the same thing. The Dowager Duchess's expression softened slightly. You're going to make an interesting duchess, Miss Harrow. Not a conventional one, but interesting is often better. It was the closest thing to a blessing Eliza had received from her, and she wasn't sure how to respond. Adrian solved that problem by excusing them both to get refreshments, steering Eliza away before she could say something that might ruin the moment. Your mother just complimented me, Eliza said once they were out of earshot. I noticed. I think I'm in shock. That's fair. I'm in shock too. He handed her a glass of champagne. Though I shouldn't be. You've systematically won over everyone who initially opposed us. My mother, half of London society. Even Ashford, who threatened to destroy me financially. I haven't won over anyone. I've just been myself loudly enough that people stopped having the energy to fight it. Same thing. They stood together watching the ball swirl around them, and Eliza felt something settle in her chest. Not quite peace. Peace seemed impossible in a world this complicated, but something like certainty. I think we're going to be all right, she said quietly. Adrian's hand found hers, hidden between their bodies, where no one could see. I think you're right. The proposal came 2 weeks later, and it was nothing like Eliza expected. She'd anticipated something grand, knowing Adrian, possibly involving more flowers than any sane person needed. Instead, he appeared at her house on a random Tuesday afternoon looking slightly disheveled and oddly nervous. I know we have another week until the official courtship period ends, he said without preamble. And I know we've already basically negotiated our entire marriage, but I wanted to do this part properly. The traditional part. Adrian, let me finish before I lose my nerve. He pulled a small box from his pocket. I'm terrible at romantic declarations. We've established that. But I want you to know that this isn't about duty or obligation or fixing my reputation. This is about wanting to spend the rest of my life arguing with someone who makes me want to be better. Someone who refuses to let me take the easy path. Someone who climbed down a trellis in a ball gown and somehow made that the beginning of everything. He opened the box. The ring inside was beautiful, but not ostentatious. A single emerald surrounded by small diamonds, elegant without being overwhelming. Eliza Harrow, will you marry me? Not the perfect version of you that society expects,
but the real version. The one who says outrageous things at balls and writes manifestos and makes me question everything I thought I knew about what marriage should be. Eliza looked at the ring, at Adrian's face, at the future spreading out before them like uncharted territory. "I need you to promise me something first," she said. He blinked. "What?" "Promise me that when this gets hard, and it will get hard, you won't retreat. Won't decide it's easier to be alone than to keep fighting for this. Promise me you'll stay." Something shifted in his expression. "I promise, on the condition that you promise the same thing. That when I inevitably do something idiotic or hurtful, you'll tell me instead of just leaving, that we'll fight it out instead of giving up. Deal. So, is that a yes?" "That's a yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, which Eliza suspected meant he'd somehow obtained her measurements without her noticing. The emerald caught the afternoon light, throwing green fire across the drawing room walls. "We should tell my mother some," Eliza said, "before she hears about it from the servants. In a minute." Adrian pulled her closer, kissing her with the kind of desperate relief that suggested he hadn't been entirely sure she'd say yes. When they finally broke apart, her mother was standing in the doorway looking like she couldn't decide whether to cry or faint. "I take it congratulations are in order?" she said faintly. "Yes," Adrian answered. "Though I should warn you, we're planning to do most of this unconventionally." "I would expect nothing less." She crossed the room to embrace Eliza. "I'm happy for you. Terrified, but happy." "That seems to be the general consensus," Eliza murmured. The wedding took place 3 months later, and it was exactly as unconventional as they'd promised. Instead of a massive cathedral ceremony, they chose a smaller church where they could actually hear each other speak their vows. Instead of a receiving line that lasted hours, they had an informal reception where people could actually talk instead of just presenting formal congratulations. Eliza wore green because wearing white felt like a lie when nothing about their relationship had been pure or simple. Adrian wore traditional formal wear but had somehow convinced the vicar to let them write their own vows, which resulted in a ceremony that was equal parts solemn and slightly irreverent. "I promise to argue with you," Adrian said, "when you're being stubborn about something important, and to listen when you argue back, to treat our marriage as a partnership instead of a hierarchy, and to keep trying even when it's difficult, because nothing worth having is ever easy." Eliza's turn. "I promise to call you out when you're retreating into emotional distance, to push you to be more than just a title or a position, to build something together that's messier and more real than what society expects, and to keep choosing you every day, even when it would be easier not to." There wasn't a dry eye in the church by the time they finished. The Dowager Duchess sat in the front row looking proud and terrified in equal measure. Eliza's mother kept dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Caroline was grinning like she'd personally orchestrated the entire thing. Even Vivian attended, sitting in the back with Lord Markham, looking like she was trying very hard to appear unbothered and failing. The reception was chaos in the best way. Dancing that lasted until dawn, speeches that ranged from touching to scandalous, conversations that violated at least a dozen rules about proper dinner topics. At one point, Eliza found herself cornered by 3 different duchesses who wanted advice on how she'd managed to negotiate such favorable marriage terms. "I just asked for what I wanted," she said, "and refused to settle for less." "But weren't you worried about him walking away?" one asked. "If he'd walked away because I had standards, he wouldn't have been worth marrying in the first place." The duchesses looked at her like she'd just revealed the secret to eternal life. Near midnight, Adrian found her on the terrace, taking a break from the festivities. "Hiding from our own wedding?" he asked. "Just catching my breath. This is overwhelming. We could leave, start the honeymoon early. We're supposed to stay until the end. Who's going to stop us? We're married now. We make our own rules." Eliza laughed. "You're going to be a terrible influence." "I'm going to be your terrible influence. There's a difference." They stood together looking out over the gardens, music and laughter drifting from the ballroom behind them. "Are you happy?" Adrian asked quietly. Eliza thought about the past 6 months, about climbing down a trellis and confronting Huntley and negotiating marriage terms like a business merger, about all the ways her life had changed from the quiet, invisible existence she'd been living. "Yes," she said, "terrified, but happy." "Good. Me too."
They went back inside together and danced until the last guest finally gave up and went home.
Then they climbed into Adrian's carriage, their carriage now technically, and headed toward Ashmont Estate and whatever came next. The estate was dark when they arrived, most of the servants already asleep. Adrian led her through halls she'd only seen once before, up the stairs to the master suite that was now hers as much as his.
"This is strange," Eliza said, looking around the room. "Being here legitimately instead of breaking in." "You didn't break in. The door was unlocked." Still felt like breaking in. He laughed, pulling her close. "You can break in any time you want now. It's your bedroom, too." Our bedroom, he agreed. They stood there for a moment, both suddenly awkward now that the performance was over and they were just two people trying to figure out what came next. "I don't know how to do this," Eliza admitted. "The married part, the being vulnerable part, the trusting that this is real and permanent part. Neither do I, but we'll figure it out." He kissed her forehead. "We've managed everything else by making it up as we go along. Why should this be different?" "Because this matters more." "Exactly. Which means we'll try harder." Eliza looked at the man she'd married. Impossible, intense, occasionally infuriating Adrian Wolfe, and felt something like hope settle into her bones. "All right, she said, "let's try harder." And they did. The first year of marriage was everything Adrian had warned it would be. Difficult and messy and full of arguments about things both important and trivial. They fought about estate management and social obligations, and whether it was appropriate to skip the Queen's Ball because they both found it tedious. But they also learned how to fight without destroying each other. Learned when to push and when to give space. Learned that love wasn't about perfect harmony, but about choosing each other, even when harmony seemed impossible. Eliza became the Duchess everyone had initially thought she couldn't be. Not by conforming, but by redefining what the role could mean. She started a salon for political discussion that scandalized half the aristocracy and secretly delighted the other half. She implemented reforms to tenant housing that other estates started copying. She spoke her mind at dinners where women were supposed to stay quiet, and slowly, other women started speaking too. Adrian stopped hiding behind the Duke persona, let himself be messy and uncertain and occasionally wrong. He fought less with his mother and more with Eliza, which somehow made both relationships better. He learned that being vulnerable wasn't weakness. It was the only way to actually connect with someone. The Dowager Duchess never fully warmed to their unconventional arrangement, but she stopped fighting it. Eventually, she even admitted that watching them argue through problems was more entertaining than most of the theaters she attended. Caroline married Lord Morrison, to everyone's surprise, including her own, and declared that if Eliza could rewrite the rules, so could she. 2 years after the wedding, Eliza stood in the same ballroom where she'd confronted Huntley, watching younger women navigate the same impossible social terrain she'd once found suffocating. One of them approached her near the refreshments, nervous and hopeful. "Your Grace, I wanted to thank you for everything you've done, for showing us we don't have to accept whatever we're offered." Eliza smiled. "You don't have to thank me. Just don't settle. Don't make yourself smaller to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. And when someone tells you that's not how things are done, ask them why not." The girl nodded, determination settling into her expression, and Eliza recognized the look. She'd worn it herself once, standing in a bedroom with a candelabra, choosing recklessness over invisibility. Adrian found her later, pulling her away from conversations about politics and reform to dance. "You're doing it again?" he murmured. "Doing what?" "Causing chaos, inspiring revolution, generally making the aristocracy uncomfortable. Someone has to. I'm glad it's you." They moved through the waltz, and Eliza thought about that first night, about being invisible, about desperate gambles and trellis escapes, and everything that had led from there to here. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Breaking your engagement, choosing chaos over safety." Adrian pulled her closer. "Every time we fight about something ridiculous, and I remember I could have married someone who never challenged me." He paused. "Which is to say, never. Not once. Not even a little." "Good answer." "I've had practice." When the waltz ended, they stayed on the dance floor, neither quite ready to return to reality. "We should probably socialize," Eliza said. "People are staring." "Let them stare. That's what we're good at.
giving people something to stare at. True. So they stayed, right there in the center of the ballroom, while around them London society whispered and judged and slowly, gradually began to change. The girl who'd been invisible had become impossible to ignore. The man who'd ruled everything had learned that the only power worth having was the kind you shared, and the marriage everyone said would fail had become the one everyone else measured themselves against. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Years later, when people asked Eliza what advice she'd give to young women navigating society's impossible expectations, she always said the same thing. Find someone who sees you, really sees you, not the version you perform, but the version you are when no one's watching. Find someone who makes you want to be brave instead of careful, and then be brave, spectacularly, recklessly, unapologetically brave. And if that doesn't work, they'd ask, she'd smile. Then at least you'll have a good story. But it would work. She knew that now, because the girl with the candelabra had started something that couldn't be stopped. And the man who'd tried to ignore her had discovered that some things, some people, were impossible to ignore. Even when you tried. Especially when you tried.